So in this video, I'm going to go over with you what you need to know before moving to New York City. Now, moving to New York City can be extremely overwhelming, but honestly, it doesn't have to be. And you're in the right place if you kind of want to figure out exactly how to build the life you want in New York City. So I'm going to break down in this video some of the hardest parts about moving to New York City. I'm not trying to be negative by any means because I absolutely love this city, but there are some things that people just don't expect really until they get here. So we're going to break them down in this video. So the first off is something that everybody knows, but it doesn't really hit people until they get here, is that New York City is so expensive. But not only just the apartments and the actual living, but also the cost of living that comes with going out, dining, getting drinks in New York City. All of that is just so expensive. And sometimes living in New York City, I don't even realize it until I go to another city or just somewhere else outside of the city and then realize how much money I'm spending every day in New York City. Like, it's actually crazy when you see the differences. Sometimes we're just so caught up in our bubble here that we don't remember how inexpensive other places are. But if you're coming from one of those places that is definitely more inexpensive, then it's going to hit you hard when you get here, that's for sure. So New York City can be extremely confusing. Getting around New York City at first. So I do have another video breaking down the subways. I believe it's just covering Manhattan, but I will do also more in-depth subway videos on all New York City neighborhoods because I do think that there's always just so much confusion about subways. And of course there is. They're extremely confusing. And once you learn them, you do really learn them and you kind of know them for life. So in the beginning, when you're trying to understand them, it's honestly like an uphill battle because it's just like doesn't make any sense. Like there's really no rhyme or reason for some of the ways that the subways run. And also I do have another video kind of explaining the avenues for streets in Manhattan. And I also have another one explaining like how New York City is an actual grid system as well. So really how to navigate your way around New York City, at least in Midtown and Uptown via grid system. And then downtown is really the only area in Manhattan specifically where you have to memorize the streets a little more. So that also brings me to my third point, which goes hand in hand with number two. And I already pretty much mentioned this, is that the subways are very hard to understand. So that's why I created so much content around the subway systems, because as a residential real estate agent, that's probably the biggest concern that I hear people have, is that they want to make sure that they're close to this subway train, or they want to make sure that their apartment is close to a subway in general, or they just want to make sure that they know how to use the subway. They don't really care which one as long as they can have a subway in the neighborhood. So there's so many questions about subways. Like, I honestly really can't think of a more common question that we get being real estate agents than the transportation. Like, that's literally probably like one of the main questions that we get. So when I moved to New York City in my early 20s, I definitely would go out in New York City for sure. And I definitely would be out late at night. Now, I do have to say that looking back at it, I do think that you should always be careful late at night, in crowds, not in crowds. I just think that in general, you just need to be careful. And it's kind of one of those things that you kind of think you're like invincible, especially when you're like in your early 20s and you're just going out and want to have a good time. You think you're invincible. But at the same time, like looking back, I'm like, probably shouldn't have been at this like sketchy subway station at like 1:20 in the morning, but I was. So I just want you to keep in mind, always be safe. And if you can, travel with other people or be in a group as much as you can, because you just never know what's going to happen. And that goes for anywhere, even outside of New York City. So I saved my most important point for last. And if anyone's watched my videos, I emphasize this all the time. Now, the neighborhood that you choose to live in New York City is probably the most important decision that you'll make. Now, I know that sounds dramatic, but I really do think that the neighborhood that you choose to live in is more important than the actual apartment that you choose, because you're probably going to spend more time in the neighborhood than you are in your actual apartment in the beginning, especially if you're coming to New York City to really like explore all that New York City has to offer. So I always advise people that if they can, before moving to New York City, if they can spend time in the neighborhood that they're planning on living in, that would definitely be great, because you really get a feel for what it's like. And when I say spend time, I don't just mean like during the day or just at night going out. I mean all times of the day. Like, be there in the morning, be there in the afternoon, be there at night, different days if you can, because it ranges so much depending on the day of the week, depending on the time of day. So I really want you to spend time there if you can. And I know it's a little difficult, especially if you're moving from a very far away place. I get it. But if anything that you really can do to really learn more about that neighborhood is really going to help you out in the long run. And if you end up moving here and hating your neighborhood, you can always just move to another neighborhood. Like, it's not the end of the world. So I hope this helped you learn a few things that you just need to know before moving to New York City. And I honestly wish that sometimes some people had given me this advice before I moved here to New York City in my early 20s. So if there's anything I missed in this video or any other questions that you have, I would love to make a follow-up video at some point to this. So as always, I love hearing from you guys. So please leave anything that you can in the comments.